What a thrill. Darkness and silence through the night. I give my life, not for honor, but for you. In my time, there'll be nobody. In a community filled with a wide array of controversies, I don't think it's a stretch to say that the most controversial game in the FnaF franchise is Security Breach. The first real free-roam FNAF game set in a big open pizzaplex in what was meant to be the next step in the big reboot of the franchise. Some people liked it, others flat out stated they were leaving the FNAF community after they played it. Me, personally, it's the Chicken Little of the FNAF franchise. It's horribly designed, unfinished walking simulator with a story that feels like they crammed it all in the last minute, taking note from J.J. Abrams as they did, and I can't help but love it. Yeah, I will never stop dissing on Security Breach, but I can't bring myself to hate it. And I'd actually rather play it more than 3 other mainline FNAF games, you know who you are. And a story for another time, this was the game that got me into game design. And as I said in my Help Wanted video, it has so many good ideas, but executes them all terribly. For the longest time, everybody said this was issues with overambition. But honestly, I never thought that. I don't know why. I always thought Security Breach's problem wasn't its scope, but rather its aim. It was just unfinished in a community that's used to getting games every other week. I knew that with time and better circumstances, the original concept for Security Breach could have been executed fantastically. Case in point, Ruin. Ruin's quality level is on a whole other league than Security Breach's. They're hardly even comparable. While it's not perfect and not nearly as good as what I'd consider peak indie horror, the fact that this came from the developers of both Security Breach and is mind-boggling to me. It's a complete game with original puzzles, challenging gameplay, decent scares, a sufficient story, hardly any glitches, and good-looking graphics. Again, this is free DLC for Security Breach. It easily could have been its own game, but here it is, free. Which is also kind of a problem, but we'll get to that later. As for now, let's take an in-depth look at the beginning of Steel Wool's redemption arc. Probably the first thing to consider when discussing Ruin in comparison to Security Breach is its overall structure and performance. First of all, this game isn't completely unfinished. The game barely has any glitches, areas don't pop in out of nowhere, and the game generally looks really good and runs decently. I only ever encountered 2 game-breaking glitches in my initial run, neither of which ultimately ruined my experience, and that's a godsend after Security Breach's track record. The only thing I think is wrong with the general performance is load time. Maybe my BC, but respawning took me forever for some reason, but dying isn't nearly as punishing as it was in Security Breach because of how Ruin is structured. Security Breach is a walking simulator. You navigate from point A to point B without getting caught. Ruin is still, by definition, a walking simulator, but it feels much more refined. For starters, the environment is much more linear. In the open area Pizzaplex, it was incredibly easy to get lost, and the horrible map didn't help at all. Here, you're put into much more linear areas with little sub-areas to explore. If there's one thing that hasn't changed, it's that the Pizzaplex is still a blast to explore. There are, however, many points of no return, similar to other horror games, so make sure you've explored every area thoroughly for collectibles, which have also changed somewhat. While the duffel bags and therapy tapes are gone, sadly, each collectible does have a small toolset to it. They aren't all winners, but it's a step in the right direction. I love reading through the Piclopedia, Atreus' journal, and other forms of secondary dialogue in other games, so this I like. And getting these collectibles feels so much more enticing because, again, dying doesn't feel nearly as unfair. Security Breach worked under a very unforgiving save system. There were no checkpoints and you would respawn where you last saved, and these save stations were few and far in between. And the less we say about the post 6 AM saving, the better. Ruin completely acts as such in favor of an autosave system, thank goodness. Dying also feels less bullcrap. In Security Breach, you could get caught by a staff bot, have an animatronic teleport behind you, and you get caught unless you find a place to hide or use one of your weapons. Essentially, every element of what I just said is gone, and the stalker system has been completely revamped. Staff bots are gone, hiding spots are gone, phaser blasters and phascam are gone, and most areas only have 1 or 2 threats. The main threat here is the Entity, which I'll talk more about later, and he basically replaces the staff bots in the way that he calls animatronics to your location in a non-teleportation way. Of course, being around him for too long can lead to instant death, so keep your distance, and the animatronics themselves aren't bad. They all look great, and much more eerie than they did in Security Breach, even their jump scares are a little long. They essentially just follow the Entity's orders, so you avoid him and by proxy them, and again, there's usually only 1 of them per area, so you're not overwhelmed by them. And as for getting from point A to point B, we've got a slew of brand new puzzles. For starters, the Phas Wrench. Some doors are locked and we have to unlock them with these little timing puzzles. That's fun enough, but also we have these node things, and we handle these a lot. There's this giant parent node that we have to deactivate, but before we do that, we must deactivate all the child nodes, which are hidden around the area, some of which being hidden in their own puzzles. And after that, we do one of these mobile game puzzles and breach the security. Sounds more like a Morbius joke the more I say it. The cameras here aren't useless. They're limited to these camera stations now, so you can only access a few from such, and the UI here doesn't suck. And for some cameras, you can use audio loops for FnaF freestyle, and for some reason, lowering music men is just adorable to me. Look at them. Other camera stations require us to find different props in a camera in a certain order, and these could have been done better. The camera just tells you when there's an anomaly and it scans it for you. There's basically no skill involved. It would have been nice if we'd selected objects rather than just scan them. Now, these are the most common puzzles, and they can be really fun. I've seen some people complaining that you do these over and over again for the whole game, for which I have two rebuttals. One, you forget which franchise you're playing.
I'm guessing yes, this is Five Nights at Freddy's. Redoing work is all part of the experience.
And two, it doesn't matter because the game is only about 3 hours long. And both of those bring up problems of their own. For starters, for those who love the core FNAF experience, time and resource management is basically non-existent. It was barely existent in Security Breach, and any traces of it is just gone now. There are no puzzles like the office sections in Security Breach. It's mostly just making progress at your own pace. For some, that's a plus. For me, I didn't mind it, but it was noticeable. And secondly, yes, this game is about 3 hours long. Not bad for free DLC. And I'm kind of baffled they did it like this. Like I said before, this could have easily been its own game, and priced it for like $15 or so. I would say that's fair game. But this game requires the purchase of a $40 inferior game, and I can't recommend you make that purchase. Security Breach itself is barely worth the $20 I paid for it. Ruin barely reaches that bar for me. And when we have games like Choo Choo Charl and Bendy for much less, yeah, I don't see many people making the full purchase for this. This kind of baffles me. This easily could have been its separate game to benefit everyone. Steel Wool could have made a small profit to put toward their next game, and people wouldn't have to buy Security Breach to play through Ruin. That may just be a me thing though. So, we've seen how Ruin has basically improved since Security Breach's performance, structure, gameplay, scares, and overall quality. That leaves one element, the story. What I said before was true. The story in Ruin is sufficient, even though I have very mixed feelings about it. It's better than Security Breaches and resolves a lot of problems that story had, but it still has its problems. Basically, rather than provide a conclusion to Security Breach's story, it clarifies what actually happened in Security Breach and sets up the next chapter of the FNAF series, to a somewhat disappointing degree. At least to me. After Security Breach, I kinda gave up on following FNAF lore, and after Ruin, I'm intrigued but not head over heels like I once was. I'm gonna go into spoilers now, so if that matters to you, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. For everyone else, 3, 2, 1... I'm not going to pretend like I know what's going on here. Ruin takes place after the Pizzaplex is ruined. Again, Morbius jokes. Gregory calls for help from inside the sinkhole under Roxy Raceway. You know, the one we went into to find that somehow Afton returned and the entire fan base rejoiced. We play as Cassie. Really quick, I never hated Gregory's voice, but I cannot stand Cassie's. Not only is her writing just on par with Gregory's, she just doesn't sound there.
That's all the way on the other side. I'm not even close.
She just sounds awful. But that's a minor nitpick. Anyway, Cassie begins exploring the remains of the Pizzaplex in search of Gregory. She finds a Roxy talkie, a radio based on her favorite character with Gregory's voice, and Gregory tells us where he is. And we begin exploring. After climbing a ladder, what a thrill, and crawling through some vents, we get jump scared by Chica. We then find the aforementioned Faz Wrench, similar to the one Cassie's dad uses, and then Monty jump scares us, plunging us into a sewer main and taking us into the depths of the Pizzaplex. Honestly, this opening hits so much better than Security Breaches. It's dark, creepy, has a proper puzzles, and decent scares. While it did concern me that the DLC was going to be purely cinematic, thankfully that was not the case moving forward. Anyway, we pop out into a horribly broken gator gulf filled with garbage and cockroaches. Here, we get the Vanny mask, with an eye on Y. Yeah, it's the model from Help Wanted for some reason. It's not the one used for the actual Vanny model. This does bring up a point. If you're expecting Vanny to be redeemed as the villain, she could be...
She died.
No, not really. While Vanny wasn't hyped up to be the villain in this one like she was in Security Breach, I do wish she got the redemption she deserved. One day, Vanny. One day. Anyway, this mask allows us to see the world around us in a different light. It's an AR mask that shows the secrets in our surroundings. There are objects that you see blocking your path in the real world, but not in AR, and vice versa. But we mostly use it to find and deactivate security nodes. And when we use the mask, we are visible to the entity, this big virtual rabbit that runs the Pizzaplex.
Coincidence? I think not!
This is kind of where it gets a little slower story-wise, so let me sum up. Gregory is always talking to us through the Roxy Talkie, and he's able to see our surroundings and do things to the entity from afar, and we have to start wondering what it is he's actually doing and how he's doing it. His intentions were already a bit misty in Security Breach, and this keeps us on our toes and preparing us for the fact that we might be helping out a serial killer or something. Secondly, one way Cassie navigates the Pizzaplex is by teleporting through screens. I like this, I think it's creative, but it brings up the technology problem many people have had since the sister location days. Just how we went from possessed animatronics to mind control to time-traveling ball pits to goo that turns into you and to technology that is able to possess someone and trap their soul in arcade machines to technology that somehow makes Metroid feel more grounded in reality. I was never too hard on FNAF's sci-fi evolution, but this admittedly does go pretty far. Anyway, the story picks up again once we make it to Roxy Raceway. In the Glam Rock Beauty Salon, we find Roxy crying away in the mirror, and this hits. In Security Breach, Roxy was arguably the animatronic with the most character, needing to keep up this self-image, and having lost her eyes and her face, she has nothing. Hearing Gregory's voice coming from nearby, she launches after him, leaving us to follow. Here on Roxy Raceway, we start to see a bit of Cassie's story. It's not all explained perfectly, but through these cardboard cutout things, we said that Cassie once had a birthday here in Roxy Raceway. But as we find out later, none of her friends showed up. She was comforted by Gregory. Isn't that nice? But this gets a lot more gun-wrenching later. Anyway, we continue through the Pizzaplex until we get to this area where Roxy is patrolling. We have some puzzles to navigate through it, and
Give me back my eyes!
Ah! Let go! Let go!
I'm sorry.
one of the most interesting parts of the game, we get grabbed by Roxy only to be apologized to. This brings up a lot of questions, some of which are answered later, but it appears that Roxy isn't trying to kill any kids that roam the Pizzaplex unattended. She's hunting for Gregory and Gregory alone. But wait, I thought animatronics were possessed by Glitchtrap to capture kids. We become more confused as we take this trippy virtual rabbit hole, literally, down to Phaser Blast, right where Vanny's hideout was, with the Princess Quest game demolished with a sword in it. What? Navigating Phaser Blast, we encounter Endless Freddy. Wait, how does that make sense? Shouldn't he be down with Grit? Oh, yeah, in case it wasn't already obvious, Ruin doesn't take place after the Afton ending, but actually a variation of the Vanny ending, explaining her absence. Now, that is how you subvert expectations. Clearly some events have happened, putting the Pizzaplex in the state it's in, but from what I can tell, this game pulls an MGS4 and somewhat decanonizes one of the worst parts of the original games. And I can appreciate that, rather than telling fans, no, you're wrong and you have to deal with it. Wait, so if Gregory is within us, then after we disable all the security nodes, Gregory tells us there's one more security node keeping him trapped. Roxy herself, leading to the best scene in the entire game.
Roxy,
Cassie. Cassie,
you remember
your special
me?
day. I remember. Your special day. Do you still like carrot cake? It has been some time since I saw you last. If I remember correctly, it is on the 11th. I remember because you are number 1. Twice. Have you booked your party? I'm sure your friends will show up this time. Cassie? What are you doing?
We're met with the easiest yet most difficult security node puzzle.
So sorry.
I love carrot cake. Happy birthday, Cassie.
Roxy, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
And now, taking a painfully long elevator ride, as Cassie, and by proxy we, are left to reflect on such an action. But it's all worth it in the end, right? We venture into the cave where the original FNAF 6 location resides, and it's also in ruin. We find a few Faz coins that we can feed to fan favorite character Candy Cadet to learn a story about a mother and a child in the woods. The mother caught a monster and locked it in the basement. The monster would growl in the basement as the mother sang a lullaby to the boy. One day while the mother was out, the monster started singing a lullaby, luring the boy into the basement. Sound familiar? If it doesn't, it will. We deactivate the last security module on this computer and watch the entity die.
We did it! We did it! We did it! Yay!
And we enter the area where Gregory is being held.
You're not Gregory.
I feel like if this didn't come out just after Mission Impossible, I'd feel a bit better about this. Also, I use ChatGPT way too much, so. This is the Mimic, the creature we've been reading about in the books that I totally read and completely understand. It used Gregory's voice to trick Cassie into coming to the Pizzaplex to free him. As it comes after us, Roxy, who I guess is alive, jumps in to save us as we run. Then we get a call from supposedly the real Gregory telling us he's not even there. Gregory then tells us where to go. We follow his instructions into an elevator and just roll the tape.
Cassie, it's me. I think I need to explain a few things. You were never supposed to go to the Pizzaplex. That thing in the sinkhole tricked you. I really don't know what it is, but it's been trapped down here a really long time. The Nexus security program was designed to keep it hidden, but you shut down the security, and now it's free. It's not your fault. I know you did it for me, to save me, but we can't risk being followed. I'm sorry.
Gregory? No!
There are also two other endings, and yeah, I'm not even gonna try to explain these. Yeah, similar to Security Breach, this just kinda ended out of nowhere. It didn't really conclude Security Breach's story as much as it said, get ready for the next part, which is kinda like how the MCU stuff is nowadays. And honestly, it's kinda hard to be excited for this when the supposed protagonist literally just let a child fall to her death. Does it end on an Afton level note? No. Am I still gonna stick around to see where this goes? Sure, why not? But I have to call this ending at least a little disappointing, because at the end of the day, it just feels like another stepping stone and to whatever the next big threat of the FNAF universe is. That being said, this is my new favorite FNAF game. Sorry, Help Wanted. Ruin works in so many different ways. Its puzzles all work, the environment and animatronics are terrifying, well, at least creepy. Its exploration is as fun as ever, and more than anything, it takes what didn't work and makes it work. It redeems Security Breach. Yeah, the story's a little disappointing, but it's miles better than that one that was really disappointing. And it sparked my interest in the lore in FNAF again. But I'm not reading the books, you can't make. Here's to you, Steel Wool. You actually have regained my respect. I wait for Help Wanted 2 with high expectations. Just please, take your time, make it good. Well, this surely was a long one. Thank you so much for staying tuned to the end. It really means a lot. I think I'm gonna take a break now. This is like my third video in 2 weeks. My name is AJ Plays, and... What kind of jump scare is that?